Hi, I'm Kate. Ethnographic Animation for new mobile user experiences. I have up there, if you're on the Twitters, the TMRT hashtag, as well as my Twitter handle at GoKate, GOK8. So if you are tweeting, please be kind. I'm just going to start up. And where I'm going to start up is telling you who I am, because otherwise, why the heck should you care what I have to say? But I think it's important for you to know how I look at animation, how I look at technology, and you can understand how I got to this wacky thing called ethnographic animation. So there on the left is my mom, Mary Jo. On the right is my dad, John. My dad was in World War II, and he came out of the war, didn't really know what he wanted to do with his life. He has a background at that time working in theater and working in music. He actually performed in the USO while he was in the war. And a buddy of his came up to him a few years after getting out and said, why don't we try out this newfangled thing called television? And my dad was like, oh, that's not going to last, but sure, I'll try it. That sounds cool. It's kind of like theater. So he did. And in the early 50s, he was working at CBS in Chicago, and that's where he met my mom. My mom was a producer at CBS in Chicago in the early 50s, and she was about 22, 23 at the time. I like to say that twice, because that's pretty awesome. My mom, woman, early 50s, 10 years before Mad Men even begins, was a producer at CBS. It's pretty cool. So my parents met there, and many, many years later, they had me. And by that time, they were in New York. So when they were in New York and I was growing up, I was a child actor. I did commercials, I did soap operas, I did a little Broadway. But at the age of 7, I was a professional making money that later would be spent paying my college education. So I would go to work when I had a job, and I would get home, and my dad would say to me, what kind of camera did they use? And, you know, 7-year-old girl, I'm like, I don't know. And he would say, well, you're staring at it all day. What kind of camera was it? And I started realizing after I would stop rolling my eyes that he's right. He knows me and knows that I'm very interested in how things work and how to build things. I've always been more mechanical minded. I wanted to pull things apart and put it back together. So I started learning, oh, was it a film camera? Was it a video camera? And then I started learning the people back behind the camera, like more than the crew, the grips, and the gaffers. But I started really learning what was going on back there, who was making money at what I was doing, the commercial work. So who were the producers, what was the agency, who was the end client, was it Procter & Gamble? And I was learning all this stuff at a really, really young age and really understanding the business side, and I was really interested in it. So I ended up going to Ohio University, got my degree in radio and television broadcasting, and ended up thinking that I wanted to work in educational television. And I did for a little while, and the way that we would put out our media was we would make laser discs. Does anyone remember laser discs? They were cool. They were the wave of the future until DVDs came along, totally killed them. But they were cool because you could print on both sides and you could do interactivity. And I love being able to use this form of media, this form of entertainment, and use it in a different way to teach people and teach kids. So from there, I went into working in the interwebs. I was a broadband producer at agency.com a good 15, 16 years ago. And I couldn't tell you at the time what my title meant. It was very hard for me to explain it to my parents. Though I would say, when I would try to explain to my dad what I did, I would say, well, I'm working in this newfangled thing called the internet, much like you and Mom worked in that newfangled thing called television. And he would kind of get that, kind of got that click over. But otherwise, the internet was kind of foreign to him. So I had to produce video that would play in little screens, about that big. And I had to figure out how to make this old media work in this new way of technology. And one of the ways I learned that it could work was by using animation. And I would hire animators to help me express something that you couldn't see with the naked eye. And sometimes it was, sometimes the internal workings of a Bowflex machine. I'd be working on an infomercial, and I'd have to show how the gears worked. So for me, I am this alien in the world of animation because I'm not an animator. In this picture, I'm an alien, and this is a independent film called Pop. It's about it's a wacky story about 2 physicists. It's a screwball comedy. You can get it on Netflix, I swear. But in the movie, I play 5, the girl from Mars. I'm an alien. And I kind of equate that, I do equate that with how I run my company and how I look at what the company does, which is animation, basically 3D animation, but it's animation that we use in a different way. We try to use this media software to make people's lives more efficient or to figure out how to explain something, and we really make it a business tool for our clients. So that's me, that's who I am. So today, I'm going to rip through this pretty quickly, but I want to get you to the ethnographic part because that's why you're all listening to me. I want to make sure we have a base of what is animation, and then from there, after I build you up to say this is animation, I'm going to say it's not that anymore. And then I'll talk about ethnographic animation. So what is it all about? How do we use it for mobile development? And then I put a reminder up there for myself about NDAs. There's some things I can't talk about, and I might act a little cagey, and I might kind of gloss over some stuff. Feel free to ask me questions at the end about it. I'll let you know if I can talk about it or not, but a lot of the clients that we work with and do product development with, you guys understand NDAs, non-disclosures. I love my clients. I don't want to piss them off, basically. And then I'll tell you how ethnographic animation can scale through a whole product continuum. And just give you a few things to remember at the end, 3 things, and then we'll have questions, because hopefully I'll keep speaking at this really rapid rate, and we'll get through quickly. Okay, so what is animation? Is it a mouse and some dwarves and a bunch of talking toys? I don't know. So animation started 1928, Mickey Mouse. It was a short film. It was kind of comics come to life. It played before a feature film called Gang War, so if you are a crossword puzzle trivia type person, that's what the movie is that Steamboat Willie played before. It was not a good movie. People didn't like it, or at least it didn't, maybe a good movie, but did not get good reviews. But people came out of the movie theater all talking about this mouse that danced. And he danced kind of like this on a deck of a boat. They couldn't remember what the movie was about, but they had this like really great emotional reaction to this cool little mouse dancing around. Then there's Snow White. Oh, I love Snow White. This is a brilliant piece of storytelling. If you haven't seen it lately, I highly recommend, especially if you have kids, watch it again, stream the media, get the DVD, whatever you like. But it's so beautiful, number one. It's a wonderful piece of storytelling. It's got wonderful characters, really great character development. Characters that you can relate to. Characters that you can say, oh, my Uncle Joe, he is that, he's grumpy. He's definitely grumpy. He's just like Uncle Joe. Which, I'm sorry, let me step aside here to say, were you here this morning with Dr. Pradeep? Yes? And he said Uncle Joe, and said Uncle Joe sells insurance. I have an Uncle Joe who sells insurance. That freaked me out. Anyway, back into this. Okay, so Snow White, highly recommend, great storytelling. And then we go forward about 60 years, and you have Dire Straits, Money for Nothing, the first all computer-generated video. A little crude in the way it looks, but highly effective. People loved it. MTV played it all the time. And again, a great piece of storytelling, really, that went along with this piece of music. And then we get to the lovely 1995 of Toy Story. We all know Toy Story. I don't have to say much about that. One of the most successful movies of all time, be it live action or animated. There's 3 parts to it now. Wonderful characters to relate with, fully developed characters that your kids and you too really can relate with. So, I was saying I was going to build you up, explain what animation is, and that is animation. You can all be in agreement of it. But animation isn't that anymore, or it isn't only that. And this is why it isn't that. This is the dawn. The dawn changes everything. When I say that, I mean what dawn represents. So, Don, there on the left, picture. He's our lead character animator in our office. He is a millennial. He's Gen Y. He loves video games. He loves science fiction. He loves reading. He's always got some book in his coat pocket when he's on the bus. And he knows media and doesn't think about media, meaning it's a screen, doesn't matter. It's animated, it's live action, doesn't matter. He just takes it all in, especially if it's a good story. And that's Don on the right side at Burning Man, hence the awesome outfit. And if you are familiar at all with Burning Man, and especially in the past few years, there's a lot more technology going on there too. Here are folks who are usually really laid back. Some might say more of our parents' generations, but are very much embracing technology. Okay, so there's the Don. Don changes everything. His generation is changing everything, which isn't to say that us, I'm Gen X, it isn't to say those of us that came before him aren't looking at media in the same way, but we aren't growing up with it as much. But we certainly do say, I'm going to go to a movie this weekend. And you don't always specify whether it's an animated movie. Maybe it's a third thing you say when someone says, well, what movie? You explain what it is, you go, oh, it's an animated movie. But really, we don't differentiate as much as we used to 5, 10 years ago between something that's animated or another piece of media. And we don't differentiate if it's something that's on a mobile device or if it's streaming media or if it's on a website or it's on the television. I can't forget about television. So this group would probably like to have a little bit of research. Okay, so I have a little bit for you here, but I am going to stand in front of my notes because I don't want to get it wrong. So when I say animation isn't animation anymore, I'm talking about how animation can be used with intent. And that can be used with educating or teaching or for us as a user for learning about something, be it a process, whatever it might be. So Sans Research, you're all familiar with that, had done a study on neuromarketing. And when they did the study, they gave tons of different kind of marketing messages and tons of different media ways. And one of their big conclusions was that animation can be more engaging for the brain than real actors. Huh, interesting. Then we move on to Riyadh Technical College. They were studying students learning organic chemistry, where you have a lot of things that you can't see with the naked eye. And they learned that animations that convey mechanistic descriptions help students to learn. Sounds obvious when I say it, but it hasn't always been so obvious, and it hasn't always been so accessible to use animation in that way, to describe something, to really break down a process. And then the Journal of the American Osteopathic Association, which I'm sure you read all the time, they had done a study in a lecture class, a science class, and they had 3 groups. They had a control group that just sat there not just sat there, but learned through the lecture. And then they had another group that learned through the lecture, but also had animation shown to them in the classroom that would explain some of the stuff that they were learning. And then they had a third group that had animation that could use that animation when they were studying. They would have access to the same animation. And what they found was that comprehension was markedly higher for students who use the computer animation. And it wasn't just that. It wasn't just that they learned it worked better, but the thing that I love from the study is that the study time, so the time that it took them to understand something, was significantly shorter for those that had the computer animation on their own. So I just find that really interesting as someone who owns an animation company and loves to see how technology can be used in ways that you just don't naturally maybe think about using them. So what can animation do? I'll rip through this pretty quickly. You can show you what your eye can't see in that top still image. It's showing an X-ray of a truck of a forklift. That's what that thing is in the front. And it's showing the internal workings and the gears and how it operates. What animation can do with something that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist yet, or it just doesn't exist at all, but you can create anything that you want, and in 3D, and here's a really key factor, in 3D, you can apply real-world physics, real dimensions. It's a truth, it's a fact animation that you can make and really say, in that middle picture there, it's a wind turbine that does not exist yet, but we can take data and take engineering and CAD files, use it, take some sort of wind velocity against those paddles on the wind turbine and say, okay, if it has this much pressure, then we can actually show in reality with the real world physics what the reaction will be. And if it hits at this angle, is that base sturdy enough? Will the whole thing tip over? So you can start experimenting using animation. It can also convey complex information. I kind of said that before with the research in classes, really being able to show a process, give a visual to a process. It can exist in any time, past, present, future, whatever, just whatever you want to show and give a visual to. Animation can do that, computer-generated imagery. And then where we get to ethnography, and I really am getting there in what time? Okay, we're good, we're good. It can allow you to feel an experience. And this is where I think it gets really, really, really cool. So with video games, there are, you may have heard this before, there are memory hooks that can be developed. And especially with 3D, and especially when you have characters in it, you start seeing the experience and you start feeling the experience of that character in that animation. And you start seeing not just the experience and the emotional part, but you also start seeing how they're interacting and what the causes of, if they move this way in a video game or in any sort of animation, what the result will be and what that experience of that person is having. So, ethnography. Are there any ethnographers in here? Yay, good, because it's really hard to describe ethnography, and I hate it when there's an ethnographer. I don't hate it. It's disappointing sometimes to see an ethnographer and they're like, no, that's not the way to define it. But ethnography is a part of anthropology, really. It's kind of a subset, sort of. It's the same kind of study of studying people in their usually natural environments. It's following them around when they're shopping, or it's seeing how someone is in their living room and how they interact with a product or technology, and it's just observations. I'm friends with this cultural anthropologist. She's fantastic. Her name's Dr. Genevieve Bell, and she's at Intel, the Intel Corporation. She's also a fellow there. Fantastic woman who does a lot of ethnographic work. And one of the things that I love that she says is that ethnography is this, but it's not just this. Ethnography is also what you do with the material afterwards. It's really what you do with the material afterwards. So you have all this great data, you have all this great information about how someone picks up a vacuum cleaner and carries it across the room in their house every day. And then what do you do with those pictures and those drawings that you might make when you're observing them? And what do you do with the video that you take? Well, what you can do is do ethnographic animation. And this definition is something that when you leave here and someone says, what the heck was she talking about? You can say ethnographic animation is social science storytelling. Because that's what it is. What we're doing is we're making a fact-based animation. We're using social science, and we're using practical science, and we're putting it together. And we're developing a product. And we can do it in parallel, and we can actually move forward in the whole product continuum in a much quicker way. And what we found is when we've done work with mobile devices and mobile development, it's really interesting what comes up, which you didn't even realize when you first started designing that new mobile product. So, ethnographic animation is about using animation as a development tool, and it's not just a means for telling a story. It is still telling a story because that's how you can attract people to watch the vision that you have about a future product or a design or a UI, is telling a story. But it's more than that because it's fact-based. So, let me show you an example from 20 years ago. Does anyone know who Darrell Bishop is? Awesome. Okay. So Darrell Bishop's a pretty well-known designer, innovator, and this is, again, 20 years ago. He made this visualization, a physical visualization of an answering machine. And I'm just going to play this animation. It's not too long. And the audio will start in just a moment.
PM.
Hi Simon, it's about 1 o'clock now. I was wondering whether you're going to come to the football. It's the weather's a bit wet and rainy, so I understand if you don't. Other than that, well, yeah, give us a ring if you're ready. Okay, bye.
PM.
Hi, Emma, it's Val.
3:30 PM.
Hello, a message for Simon Phipps. Your flight is BA 6213 at 12:30, Monday the 15th of October. Your job number is BS 436215, and the pickup address is 44 Camden Mansions, Kensington Mall. Bye.
2:45 p.m.
Hello, Simon, it's George. Could you give us a ring? My phone number is... Talk to you later. See you. Bye.
I love the ... Or is it? Okay. Okay, so what we have here is an answering machine. An answering machine that when you watch this visualization, this animation, you can start really getting the experience. You get the experience of the phone calls come in, sure, but then you get the experience of what is it like to listen to the messages. I love that you have this tactile kind of marble. You get to hold your message in your hand, and you can take that message and put it in a little tray on the side for your roommate or your sister or your mom or whatever. If it's not your message, you don't have to listen to all of it. You can put it aside and make a little note and a little reminder for yourself of when your flight's going to be. I love that you can push in the tone, as they say, for you don't have to write down a phone number. You can just take that little ball and put it in the phone. One of the critiques when they started trying to decide if they were going to develop this product was, what happens when my 3-year-old gets a hold of the marbles? Good point. There's also some other feedback about a dog taking the marble and eating it, and it would be a mess. And you wouldn't get that message, that important message. So I love that you can look at what's good, and you can look at what is not working. And by doing it this way, Darrell Bishop made the animation the prototype. Didn't have to make a whole rapid prototype, didn't have to build anything, didn't have to test the technology, didn't have to get too far down the road at all. He just gave a visualization of what the experience would be, and by doing that, you didn't have to go down and make a whole hypothesis of what, if this and if that. You just said, okay, here's the experience as I see it, and then they could know what they could correct, perhaps making a place for the marbles to go that a kid couldn't get to them. It would be enclosed in some child-proof way, or what they ended up doing was not making it. So we have that, and then we can talk about how today we use ethnographic animation. Are there developers in the room? Hi, you're human too. Okay. So ethnographic animation for humans and developers. Developers most certainly are human. Developers also tend to look at development and product design, always with this, just a different, slightly slanted sort of way, because they're looking at what it's going to take and the good and the bad. So with ethnographic animation, when you put characters in it, if you'll recall from Snow White and from Toy Story, we know these people aren't real, but you start having people who are experiencing things and are experiencing what that product or what that design feature is like. And it could be a UI or whatever. But what we've learned is we make our characters, in this case they're all blue, but we make them in some way where you don't know where they are from in the world. They could be from Taipei, they could be from South Dakota, who knows. But all you do know when you watch an animation, and in this case these were all high-tech products, they were all technologically based. With these examples, you would watch, you'd say, okay, that's a person, or that's a kid, or woman, man, you get that much. But then you start looking at what the experience is. So we take the ethnographic data, and sometimes it is video data, but in the video, consciously or subconsciously, you look at a study and you say, that doesn't look like my living room, doesn't look like my grandma. And you start getting distracted by things in the room, if it's in a living room or if it's in a store. And you start just not paying attention 100%. If we take the data, take the real-world physics that we want to express and put it into a 3D animation, not only can you start showing what a product looks like now, but you can start tweaking the product in the animation itself. So you make it a real fact first. You show this experience. You're not distracted by what the person looks like. You're not distracted by too much detail in the environment. And here we have, it's probably a bus station. It's outside. Then there's a cafe, and that's inside a home. You start looking at that, you just realize enough to know where we are, what the person's doing. And then with animation, you can also render it to be photoreal. So the products in this particular series of animations, we rendered photoreal so you would be drawn to look at what the product actually looks like now. And then you can go back a month later and say to who's ever making the animation, you can say, okay, now could you make that a little bit wider or a little bit heavier? And you can see how a person who is a woman who's of typical hand size, what she will do when she goes to pick something up. Will she hold it the same way, or is there more room now that she doesn't have to worry about pushing down on buttons? So here is an example of a product in development. Don't know where she's from. Get kind of an idea. She's in a retail environment. And this proved really, really helpful when we start talking about UIs on the side. And we started really developing being able to say how big the person of this height, where you would want the screen to be, but also begin to start testing in reality now, because some of this stuff does exist, perhaps not in America. But you can start seeing, okay, how do you want things to line up? What will it look like? Do you want to have buttons at shoulder height? Do you want to have buttons down below? And you start just getting this really great visualization, and then you can come back to the animators again and start saying, okay, let's switch this up, and you start using this animation as the prototype. And you don't have to go into a rapid prototype stage until much later in the process. So, mobile design, I'm getting there. Is it a half hour in? It is. Finally got there. So, mobile design. This has been really interesting to me, doing this type of work. Again, we have a different kind of stylized character, shadow person. I'm sure you've seen shadow people in a lot of different marketing and all different types of stuff. So it could be from anywhere in the world, the person could be. What we've learned with doing mobile device design is, and I actually will borrow from Dr. Pradeep earlier, he had said that millimeters can matter. Wow, it really does matter with mobile devices, between what you might call a tablet, what you might call a smartphone, handheld device. The thing that has become really apparent to me is people, it's not just the technology in the hand, and you can design and make this beautiful UI and great interactivity and have great processing power, but how are they going to carry it around, and how do they want to carry it around? And how do they carry around that mobile device now? And we started just getting some really interesting data, and really, really interesting to watch, because you start seeing how people will jam this big thing into a pocket because they have nowhere else they want to put it, and they want hands-free because they're shopping. Or they want to put it in a coat pocket, or they do want to carry it in the hand, but how do you carry it in your hand when you know that it's a female who has a purse, and what are the variations of how you would carry a purse as well as carry the device, as well as not push on a button that could easily turn that on or send a text message or a tweet. So there's the real world physics really comes in when designing for mobile, when using the real world data. I can't show you a full animation, I'm sorry, but it just gives you the idea. But we can really see the size, the weight. We can start really studying what kind of pocket shapes, and with pocket shapes on clothing, can kind of start making some conclusions about, oh, this part of the world, male or female, this type of clothes, this kind of phone really goes for that market, and it becomes a selling point after a while, how the device is designed, and also what the weight of it is. And again, a millimeter can really matter. So when you go into the scaling the assets and the whole product continuum, this gets pretty neat, and this was actually a surprise for us. And when I say us, I'm just going from what I know. I am most positive there are other companies that do this, so it isn't just us. When I talk about scaling the assets, what we found, the biggest thing that we found, was that there is greater time to market. Is that what I mean? Faster time to market. That's what I meant. Faster time to market. And I believe it came out of the whole thing that we're designing in parallel, that we're doing the product design right from the beginning in parallel with the user experience design. And we're able to send an animation, or our clients are able to send an animation that we do based on ethnographic data, send it around the world to their partners, They don't have to send a bunch of Excel sheets. They can send this animation. Everybody's on the same page. After a while, you start getting to know the characters, and that you start giving them names and say, you start just giving them a little bit of a personality. But when you start with ethnographic animation, you have that real-world data, and then you move on to what might be an ideation stage, and you start thinking, what can I do to change this? If I put another pound here on the weight, if we make the base a little bit bigger, and you start hypothesizing what it could be, and then when you go into the new product visualization stage, you can actually start applying that. And you don't have to start over at scratch. You have these great economies of scale when using animation because you've already built this diorama, you've built these people, you've built the set. And you can just use what you have and just start tweaking it. And it takes a lot less time than going through and making a prototype, an actual real-world prototype of some sort. Move on to virtual prototyping. So it is a prototype, but you can start making the UIs and start really seeing how, again, the dimensions are going to work with a person of this typical hand size. Go on to working simulation, where you want to simulate. You can show the current experience and then show what you expect expect the simulation to look like, and you can start using those animations when you go into user testing and go to a focus group and start seeing, here's a fact, you show them what is a fact, this is what it looks like now, here's what we're thinking of changing it to, what do you think, focus group, what's your feedback on that? So, does it work? Yeah, it does, it really does. Again, I've been really surprised. It's kind of happened really organically using animation in this way, and I love it, again, because I love science and math. I have a whole math tattoo on my arm, all morphisms, because I think just math is one of the most creative things in the world. It's beautiful. And it's been really, really exciting to be able to use this beautiful media, 3D, and say, how can we use this to make as a business tool and as a development tool? And these are quotes from some of our clients who are Fortune 100 companies. I can't say where they're from, but I swear these are real honest to goodness quotes from them. Lastly, 3 things to remember. Bless you. 3 things to remember: that animation isn't animation anymore. So it isn't that that initial animation from the past 60 years has gone away in any way, of course. But the way we think about it, the way we use it, the way Gen Y uses it and thinks about it is different. And it's really, really powerful, I believe. I think ethnographic animation endeavors to capture people's experience in animation. So again, it's just fantastic to be able to say, get someone to relate with this character. It might be all blue, might be a shadow character, but you're looking and just naturally saying, oh, what are they experiencing? And you're focused on it in parallel with actually having a product to stand behind it. And then animation scales. You can start and create this whole, and I always say a diorama because that's what I remember, and it's a really great visual to me when we're kids, making a diorama for school, do like a book report. But you make this diorama, you make all the characters, you make the scene, and then you just sit there and tweak it, and that animation becomes your prototype. And it's a really great economies of scale to do development. And I do have a 4th one, that anything is possible. It really is, an animation in computer-generated world. I started this company 15 years ago, and it was a really hard sell to talk to people about animation. It was right when Toy Story was coming out. And people didn't quite get what the possibilities are, and it's amazing now what you can do with it. Of course, this whole other part of all with gaming and those kind of fully immersive experiences. But it's a beautiful thing, the computer-generated world it is. It is. And that's it. There we go. All right. Question?